Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for you today. This is a continuation of my updated in-depth guide series. We're on to ice. Now, as per usual, in the pinned comment, the description of the video, as well as the YouTube time search bar, you will find timestamps to each relevant section of the guide. So if you're looking for just the might section, might single target, melee, ranged, if you're looking for precision, tanking sides, loadout specs, whichever, you will be able to find a direct link to that section. Now, I will mention that there is super speed movement usage in this video. You can get away without it, but ice needs a little bit of help in terms of the damage department, so I am using power like Whirling Dervish. You will see me use iconics like Freezing Breath, just because ice is a little bit lackluster in terms of the options available to us because of some persistent bugs, which I'll touch on in the video. So, take care and enjoy. Okay, for Ice Might, it's going to follow the same principles in terms of all Might specs. So we got Superpowered, critical attack chance and critical attack damage are maxed, Might and Power is maxed. And Iconics, you don't necessarily need each one for each loadout, but depending if you're going to be using ranged or melee, you may want to keep it spec just in case you have to change your loadout on the fly. So Heat Vision, Freezing Breath, Neon Venom Boost, and Robot Sidekick are the 4 iconic powers that Ice uses. Super Speed, once again, you're not required to take the innates. Ice is not power heavy at all. I just chose to because I had to go down to the bottom to get Speed Drain and Whirling Dervish. Weapons, you just need the 1 innate. And then I chose to put everything else into health. This is a melee spec. And really, you're not doing any weapon tapping, really. Like if you're doing range or single target, you're canceling Freezing Breath, but really there's not much else. Your Avalanche are in the animation for, so you want to tap cancel that. So its prec is not necessary. I'd much rather have survivability, considering that Frost Slam is going to be like dead melee range. Same with Dervish. So I'd much rather have this survivability. In terms of gear, we're going to Blast Adapter. Head mod's going to be either or. It's going to be Supercharged, Neon Venom Boost, or Ice Elemental. I did Ice Elemental because I am carrying over from a single target build. But if you're using Neon Venom Boost in range or melee, you can switch to that. Neck mod's going to be Escalating Might. Back mod's going to be Berserker. Nothing really fits for Ice. Chest mod's going to be Extended Supercharge. You could also run Penetrating Strikes. Leg mod's nothing scale, so don't worry about it. Your trinket, you want something, Shadow Bat, Vampire Bat, the Summer Event Trinket, the Snake Turret. There's plenty of options. DPS Trinket, Spy Drop, and Orbital. Max damage in the hands. Since we are using Whirling Dervish, you need to use dashing combos to cancel Whirling Dervish. And then for artifacts, Ice really just operates with 4. So it's going to be Transformation, Strategist, and Granorum for the PI. And then if you're using single target build, it's going to be Soul Amplifier. I guess it's technically 5. It depends on the build you're doing. But you could be using Gemini for the Gemini spam. Just depends on what kind of raid group you're in. If you're in a raid group that's constantly spamming Caster's Watch, then yes, you want to run like Speed Drain and Blizzard, or Speed Drain and Neon Venom Boost, or Speed Drain and Pheromone Bloom. Just so you can pretty much use a Supercharge off cooldown to maximize your Gemini damage. So just depends on what type group. That's not viable in a group without Supercharge spam. So if no one's doing it, then don't worry about it. Just use a regular loadout. But I'll touch on that when we actually get into the loadouts. In terms of augments, you're going to have whatever the current tier adaptives are for Might. And then your origins are always going to be Might as well. And then you can't see it, but the gen mods obviously are going to be Might as well. I chose to put health in my blues. Once again, ice is not power intensive, so you don't need power. And then yellows, obviously you're going to take dominance because you're going to be ice, so you're going to be tanking. So let's get into loadout here. So in terms of an ice melee loadout, I'm going to touch on kind of throughout the guide why Ice Boulder Strike can lead to some bugs, why Frost Blast can lead to some bugs, why Ice Boulder Throw can lead to some bugs. because those are some powers that I'd much rather use on a melee build. Frost Blast is just too long. Animation, not practical. Myself personally, I find that Ice Boulder Throw. I really wish I could use it. Amazing power, great damage. But once again, it gets blocked by NPCs. Ice Boulder Strike was more of a map design issue, but really got no choice to use that. So we start off with Avalanche, go into Whirling Dervish, Frost Slam, Ice Boulder Strike, and then repeat. I'll show you in the rotation, but Avalanche is really handy for raids because of the full movement mode while you're in it. So kind of same concept as munitions, where you can do damage and be mobile at the same time. So that'll become much more prevalent when I show you in the rotation. Now, the only other loadout that could be possible is when you're in a Gemini spam group, which I mean like the support roles, like there's 2 healers or maybe 2 tanks, there's 2 healers and a tank, they're all spamming Caster's Watch. You're going to have to run either Gemini to be competitive. And that's just where it's at. So at that point, you would drop Grenorm, because really the only thing that impacts is Ice Boulder Strike. Ice Boulder Strike, even without the Frostbite and PI, is still going to hit with a good magnitude. Avalanche doesn't need the PI. Dervish obviously doesn't use the PI. Frost Time doesn't use the PI. So you would drop Grim and its passive damage just so you can maintain the Strategist Guard and Transformation. And then basically at that point, you're running another Supercharge. So you could run Neo Venom Boost and Speed Drain, Neo Venom Boost and Pheromone Bloom, Neo Venom Boost and Blizzard. More than likely, you're going to have to run a 25%er. So basically, the concept behind that is that every second the speed drain and Neo Venom Boost are on cooldown or off cooldown. That's Neo Venom Boost might not be practical because it's a 45. So did I spec? Probably didn't spec Pheromone Bloom, but I mean you could use Pheromone Bloom right here as well. It's a 25%er. It does a little bit of burst damage, but I mean it's not so much the damage on the Supercharge you're looking for. Same thing, you use Blizzard too. You can use Blizzard and Speed Drain or Blizzard and Pheromone Bloom. Speed Drain's a dot, Pheromone Bloom's a burst. But the concept is that you're not so much using it for the Supercharge damage, you're using it for the Gemini damage. So all the other group members in the group, they're standing within your circles that contribute the damage to the ad. So it's not so much something you're running to pugs, but in a lot of endgame raids or endgame players, or if you get or like specific groups, obviously if they make specific groups, you may run into that, where if you run just the normal ice rotation, you're going to fall behind. It's just with them using Geminis and being able to use Supercharge off cooldowns, multiple ones, you're just going to run well behind. So that's why stick to these 4, run Speed Drain and Blizzard, or Speed Drain and Pheromone Bloom, whichever. More than likely you can get away with Blizzard and Pheromone Bloom, or Blizzard and Speed Drain. So that each time they're on cooldown, you use it, proc the Gemini, go into your rotation, and you kind of cycle from there. So that's the loadout. I don't show this in the rotation because it's not practical. I mean, I can't show you a Gemini rotation because it's not going to be the same thing. It's designed to have Gemini being used with multiple players to be able to have Pollux's gauge at the 20% damage. So if I show you that solo, it's not going to make any sense. So that's why I don't show rotation for that, but just be mindful that if you see a whole bunch of green circles, you're going to have an armory switch to, or if you know there's going to be a whole bunch of green circles, you're going to have to switch because it's just you're going to be missing out on that damage. But I don't want to necessarily highlight a loadout like that. I'm just telling you that you're going to need a loadout like that in your back pocket to remain competitive as ice or any power set really nowadays, unless you've got like a really, really good 50, like say like Earth. But this is going to be the more general rotation for solos, alerts, raids, whichever. So let's jump into the rotation. Okay, so you can get the gist of the rotation there. Usually it's going to be, my might's a little bit low because I don't have the Chester back yet for this DLC, so that's where some of the might will come from. You should be sitting at around 79 K might. Well, on the EU server, I'm about 80K might with artifacts. But, I mean, 87, 86, 82, you're going to have some dips. Some of that's attributed to how this parsers are set up with the boxed in. I'm missing some targets. 92, like it's got potential. The nice thing I like about this rotation is that it's set up really well for raids. So what I mean by that is, let me just minimize this. Say you're in a raid, like say like, you know, even Fractured Godsphere, you're running to the next set of ads, you're not at the set of ads yet, you can start Avalanche, and by the time you get close to the ads, you're ready to do your melee rotation and do Frost Slam and Ice Boulder Strike. So it works really well from that aspect of being mobile. Similar to their kind of concept as munitions. So it's very nice to get a jump start on the set of ads because you move just as quick with Avalanche. So you start Avalanche, you get full damage, get up close, and you're straight into, you know, Whirling Dervish and Ice Boulder Strike. And Ice Boulder Strike is nice as a finisher because, say, if it was like a set of 3 ads and 1 ad is left, Ice Boulder Strike has a very high single target damage as well as a critical magnitude. So you're going to do really well. What kind of sentences? What kind of phrase is that? You're going to do exceptional damage on single target with Ice Boulder Strike in that end. So it just sets you up very well. So Ice Boulder Strike, same thing as range. You could do that and then go into Avalanche. So it's more practical, especially for alerts, for solo content, anything like that. It's very practical. You do need to be mindful of the fact that Avalanche is interruptible. So if you're doing this like solo open world content, yes, you could get lunged, but in a raid, some alerts, that's unlikely to happen. Especially with Dervish being vulnerable to blocks, so most likely they're going to try to lunge you, and then you go into Dervish, they're not going to be able to block in time, and then Frost Slam, Ice Boulder Strike. So that's what it is. Technically, you can use Ice Elemental. The only thing that's going to be very, very restrictive in terms of movement. So in like say in Fractured Godsphere, that's not going to work. There's too much space between the ads. But say like Phoenix Cannon, like how all the ads are in that first hallway, you could easily get away with Ice Elemental and do massive damage with Avalanche, with Ice Boulder Strike, even with Frost Blast, which you'll see in my single target rotation. But it's very plausible. You can't use movement mode. That's the issue. So you can't use movement mode while you're in Ice Elemental, but so you need to be raids to be fixed. So like Phoenix Cannon's a really good example. Not so much for first boss, but for last boss. The hallways are really good for that. DME is a bad example. DME last boss would work. I wouldn't use it on Hawkman just because it's pretty much slow, and if you have the orbits following you around, that's not going to work. So it's going to be situational, but just be mindful that it will do more damage with Ice Elemental than Neo Venom Boost, but it's not as practical. So in terms of Ice Might single target, in terms of a loadout, we have Glacier Flash, which is going to be the finisher. We have Freezing Breath, which we're tap canceling after 2 ticks. Ice Boulder Strike, Amplified Heat Vision, Robot Sidekick, and Ice Elemental is the Supercharge. Now, I will say with Ice Elemental, that's only going to work in fights where there isn't a lot of movement, which, I mean, to be fair, for boss fights, there's really not that much movement in them. So that's why Ice Elemental, like 9 times out of 10 is going to work. I mean by that, you're not allowed iconics and you're not allowed movement modes in Ice Elemental. So, say for like hallway ads, if you're chasing ads, that works. But if, say, like you're Fractured Godsphere and running down all those tunnels and those open areas, not going to work. You're going to be way too slow. But for Grail, it works perfectly. For Zeus, it works perfectly because, I mean, it's stationary targets. There's not a lot of movement. For example, Lady Blackhawk wouldn't work because you got to move around to get to all those mechanics to protection fields. Where Phoenix Cannon last boss, that would work fine because there's it's static enough. So obviously, if you're not using that, use Neo Venom Boost. But 9 times out of 10, you want to use Ice Elemental. Now, in terms of Freezing Breath, I really wish we didn't have to use this. I would much rather use Ice Boulder Throw. Ice Boulder Throw Does way more damage on actual parsing, but the problem is it's not as practical in raids because it still runs into the same bug where it can explode off NPCs. I was finding this into the Grail fight. Grail's father box, it would explode and do like, you'll see it right away because it does like, I think like 1204 damage, like 1204 damage instead of like 100k damage. So like 2 ticks of freezing breath, even if they crit, that's like 60k, 65k. Where like one ice boulder throw, if they crit, that's 100k. I've had ice boulder throws crit in raids for 100k, just one throw. Massive damage, but it's still not practical yet. I wish it was because it's a really nice change of pace from the normal. Like there's no power sets really that you're picking up boulders and throwing them. Like it's a completely different play style, which I liked about ice. I tried to get it fixed before in terms of my previous ice video, my first updated guide, or not my first updated, but my first in-depth guide. I mentioned Ice Boulder Strike, mentioned Ice Boulder Throw, and mentioned Frost Blast. We got none of the 3 fixed. So, well, it's not so much fixed, but I mean, it's just Ice Boulder Strike in terms of the ceiling bug. That's a map design issue. That's nothing they can fix with the power. The same thing as Mini Nuke. So what I mean by that is, say you're going to do what was that? The second boss in Throne, the Sea Beast. So if you're doing Sea Beast, if you try to do Ice Boulder Strike on the event or our Mini Nuke, it's not going to hit. It's going to do 0 damage because Sea Beast is too high up and it drops down from the ceiling. It doesn't do any damage. You can also see that in the solo. So if you do the solo, and on Grail when those the barriers come up. So if you're too close to the barrier with Grail, the Ice Boulder is going to hit the top of the barrier and not Grail. So it can still happen. It's a map design issue. So, but I mean, it's still one of Ice's best powers. So really, you don't have a choice in using it. You just got to hope for the best. But I mean, 99% of the time, it's not an issue. You could miss, but it's a map design thing. So it's nothing. It's out of your hands and out of the developer's hands. Well, the out of the power set designers, like not the map design people. So in terms of that, Frost Blast still has the same interrupt bug where you can clip it too early. So I can kind of show an example here. If I'll get it to work. So if you clip Frost Blast too much at the end, you're not going to get the damage. Actually, I should probably be in a sparring target rather than you guys just taking my word for it. So using Frost Blast, it's tuning up, and you clip it too early. Obviously you saw no Frost Blast damage. So even if it's like right towards the end, and use it, no Frost Blast damage. So that's massive damage being missed because you have to keep it the entire duration, can't clip it even early. So it's too long and not practical for a lot of situations. Yeah, it's massive damage. Like you're going to parse really high with it, but it's not practical. Even if you do that once, or that worked. But I mean, even if you screw this up once, you just lost all that damage. So that's like, 80k, so Frost Blast does really high damage, but if you mess it up once in a raid, then you lost all that damage. So that's why I personally don't like using Frost Blast. I would much rather see it be like Fire Burst from Fire. So that's the bug that's still persistent with that. We still have the Ice Boulder Strike bug. And then in terms of like Ice Boulder Throw, I can show you what I meant by the type of damage. So just like one throw. Crit for 40. Let me go back to parser here. The second one didn't crit. So like one Ice Boulder Throw when it comes up here, probably be like 70, 80k. So I don't think the second one crit. 60, same thing. So 60k damage from one throw on single target, and the same thing you can do it on ads as well. So massive damage you just saw from the one throw will come up on the parse here. Or maybe I caught the end of 10 seconds. Yeah, I probably caught the end of 10 seconds. Probably caught on to the last parse. But yeah, so one Ice Boulder Throw, almost 180k damage. So that's why I like Ice Boulder Throw, but it's just not practical in content. So that's the shame of that. And that runs us into the Ice Single Target. And then I'll touch on Ice Elemental. The Ice Elemental Loadout, I'll touch on it in the rotation as well. But it's going to be Glacier Flash, Ice Boulder Strike, Avalanche, Frost Blast, Winter Tempest, and Reflection. Because of the damage boost from Ice Elemental, which is 60%, you have to use Frost Blast. You have to get away with it because it can crit up to, I've had up to 400k in a raid that's buffed. But, I mean, when you're missing out on a chance for 400k damage on a single target, then you have to take the opportunity. But I'll show you exactly how to use Ice Elemental in the rotation clip. And then we're getting too close to the 35% range, so it's going to throw off the parsing. But, I mean, you see Ice. I mean, Ice is nothing to write home about in terms of single target, but at the same time, it's not only lackluster as well. It's right in the middle. So, you know, you can get consistent 50s. I'm missing about 1,000 might compared to max stats for this DLC. But, you know, mid to high 40s, low 50s, mid 50s, which is still, I mean, not terrible whatsoever. But what Ice Elemental affords us with Ice is, in the situation that it works, Ice Elemental, think of it kind of like a mini Rage. Obviously not as good as Rage Berserk, or Rage single target is weak or weaker, but Berserk makes it, brings it up to that top tier. Where Ice Elemental is the same kind of concept as Ice and kind of helps us supplement that damage. So in Ice Elemental, DPS form, so we got Glacier Flash, Ice Boulder Strike, Avalanche, Frost Blast, Winter Tempest, and Reflection. And I'll show you the rotation with it. It works really well this DLC because of the amount of ads on the single target as well. Like the Grail has ads, Zeus has ads. But it can do just as well single target. So we'll show you an example here. The other reason why it's really powerful in this meta is that of the cooldown. So Ice Elemental, it's still a 5,000 power cost, but it's a 0.5 second cooldown. So what that is if you have a group that's spamming Gemini circles off cooldown, like I'll show you in the attached clip here, just of example and content of me using Ice Elemental and Grail, you can be an Ice Elemental the entire fight, just depending on the amount of supercharge you have, which, you know, at that point you're dealing massive damage, especially to the ads, especially on single target with like a buff troll, massive damage, because of that cooldown and because of that lower supercharge cost. So let's take a peek at the Ice Elemental rotation here. So that's the rotation there with Ice Elemental. I mean, yeah, it's deceptive on a parsing because we're not actually in content. I'm not buffed by all. I don't have Omega, don't have Nitro, don't have augment buffs, don't have like a troll buff with a claw buff. So that's where those criticals kind of go through, which you'll see in the clip. So the reason why I do that rotation, and that rotation only, is because you've got a couple options here. Because you can't use iconic powers in Ice Elemental, I like starting off my rotation when I'm going to use it after Heat Vision. So clip Ice Boulder Strike with Ice Elemental because it's a clip Supercharge. So you ideally want to do that because it's got the shortest cooldown. But do Heat Vision, which basically is going to set up your dots, set up your strategist card procs. Even so, if you're in a huge Supercharge spam group, you can drop Solar Amplifier and take Gemini. And then you get the Gemini damage each time you go into it. So that's an option as well. Because if you have that much supercharge in the group, like healers and tanks feeding you, then you're not even going to, it doesn't even matter because you're going to be using one power and then back into Ice Elemental. But obviously if you're not, then obviously you'd have to run Soul Amplifier. But since Heat Vision there, you have to set up the dots, clip with Ice Boulder Strike into Ice Elemental. Once you're in there, start up with the finisher. Ice Boulder Strike, Avalanche, Frost Blast, repeat it, and then if your timing is right, you can do a Wintry Tempest clip with Reflection. I mean, technically you could do Phase Dodge too, whatever, if it's in there. I don't think I have it spec'd in this one. Yeah, I don't have Phase Dodge spec, but I mean, technically, yeah, if you're super speedy, you can do Phase Dodge. I just use Reflection because it doesn't matter. You just need a clip. So with Tempest being Reflection, even though it's used in Ice Elemental and you'll drop the form right after, the dot continues on. So you got basically a free dot to continue on your actual regular rotation. So you've basically got your normal single target rotation on top of a Winter Tempest dot and having a shield. So and that always helps as well. So that's what my specific rotation in Ice Elemental. That's what I mean. There's other ones where you can kind of like maximize how many Frost Blasts you get, but I mean that's really dependent on your crits. I like this because it's way more consistent, especially if you got ads. If you have ads, it's way better to use Avalanche than Frost Blast because of how it adds up. Especially if it's like a target's low, you get the finisher as well. So I mean the numbers you'll see are just through the roof. But I like having the Tempest Reflection clip at the end because you basically get a free 12-second dot to continue on your rotation. So, you know, who doesn't have free damage? So let's get to the clip and show you a little more practical because obviously the parsing is going to be completely deceptive because, I mean, I'm not on a Spy Drop, not on Trinket, not on anything, so not on a Gemini Circle. So it's this isn't like a practical environment to show how Ice Elemental works because it's a buff supercharge. So let's get into that clip and I'll show you why you want to use Ice Elemental. Okay, so in terms of a ranged loadout, we start off with Freezing Breath. Once again, Ice doesn't have the most ranged abilities. So Frost Blast, once again, even though it's max range, not as practical personally that I find in content. Wintry Tempest, yeah, it's a okay 12-second dot. Everything else is kind of melee. Arctic Gust is melee. Bitter Winds, Frost Slam. Snow Devil's not really practical for a Might rotation. A Resonant Gale sets up a small dot. But really, you're going to need Freezing Breath, which is tap cancelled after 2 ticks. Then we go into Ice Boulder Strike. Amplified Heat Vision. So we're still using Heat Vision on range, not so much for the damage because of obviously it's being reduced because of the non-splitting. We're using it to set up procs for the Strategist card. So Heat Vision kind of goes hand in hand with the Strategist card because of the multiple ticks, the explosion procs, and all the burning dot ticks on the AoE. We have much more opportunities for it to proc the Strategist card, which is what we're going for in that rotation. And then basically finishing it off with Avalanche. So we have the couple ticks from Freezing Breath, we have the burst damage from Ice Boulder Strike, and we have the dot, de facto dot. Avalanche isn't a dot, but multiple hits consecutive, along with Heat Vision to set up those Strategist card procs. So we have the Strategist card procs ticking, while we have the burst damage from Freezing Breath and Ice Boulder Strike to start us off. So that's the concept behind it. You're still using Heat Vision just to proc those dots. You're going to get much more opportunities than, say, using Wintry Tempest in that situation, or using another dot. Or using, a Burt, like your Resonant Gale is only going to be like, I think Resonant Gale is a 3 or 4 tick dot. So it's just not as practical. Heat Vision is going to be the way to go for this range rotation. Alright, so that's the ranged. Now, the first question you're going to be asking is why you're still using Heat Vision. Where did I start? There. Why you're still using Heat Vision. The Heat Vision, even though it was adjusted in terms of its splitting damage, you're still using it for ranged if your power set doesn't have any better abilities because of the AoE burning dots. Like the explosion helps. I mean, it's a little bit extra damage, but it's the AoE burning dots that you're setting up on all those targets, which leads to better opportunities to proc the Strategist card. That's why you're using it on ranged. So you're still sitting at like over a million, low 90s, depending on how many procs you're going to get. 225, 220 versus like 206, 205, 206, back up to million again, 96. So it's going to be hovering around a million, which is still okay for ranged AoE. It's not like Ice is anything to write home about, considering I have to use Freezing Breath and Heat Vision in it. And Neo Venom Boost technically. So it's not like anything to write home about in terms of Ice ranged. But if Frost Blast was more consistent in terms of, say if it worked like fire burst, which is one of the suggestions I'm going to make, that'd be fine. It's just that it's too long. It has a chance to be clipped out of it. So even if you clip out of it once, I mean, you're losing all that damage. It's already a damage loss. So even screwing it up once is enough to cost yourself, hundreds of thousands worth of damage. So it's not practical to use. Sure, you're going to get like high spark prices with it. Like you can get some really nice parches with it, but in terms of using it in an actual raid, it's just too vulnerable until they make those adjustments, or if they ever make those adjustments. But right now, this is kind of what you're dealing with to get some ranged. And in the end, still not bad. Okay, so welcome to the precision side of the guide. Now in terms of that spec, we're going to be taking Weapons Expert, critical attack chance and critical attack damage maxed out, maxing out precision, and then we go to iconic powers. With ice, you just need robot psychic and new venom boost. Now in terms of super speed, depending on your weapon choice, like say you're doing one-handed flurry, you're going to want to take vortex trap and dervish just for the tap cancel and the jump cancel. But depending on your weapon, combos, that's what's going to kind of dictate that. And phase dodge is used to drop down the tier, so you don't taking the movement innate is not required. You're not going to run out of power at all with precision, so that's not an issue. Now the weapons, because I'm focusing on a brawling spec, we're going to be focusing on haymaker for the melee combos. At least in the next spec here. For range, it's going to be Shuriken Storm Mastery, so that's why I spec both, just so I can use both. Same thing, same principles like a dual flurry shot. You have flurry shot and you spec explosive shots. You have single target range in the same one. Now I have melee and range just in case, which means you're required to max out the martial arts tree. And the remainder of your skill points, I would put Might and Power. You don't need health for survivability. You think is melee based, but Ice does have the beneficial ability of running a shield in the melee build. I would much rather you put skill points on Might and Power. In terms of the mods, weapon's going to blast adapter. Your head mod's going to have neo venom boost. I mean, technically you could use critical ice bash, but you're running transformation anyway, so it's much better to have the extra supercharge. Neck mod's going to be relentless precision. Back mod's going to be berserker. Nothing really lines up with it. Chest mod's penetrating strikes. Leg mod doesn't matter. Nothing scales. Hand mod's going to be max damage. Foot mod's going to be tumbling mastery. Now in terms of trinkets, doesn't really matter what you pick. One of the dark contract bats, the vampire bat was one of the good ones. DPS trinkets or Brawling supply, so really it's your choice. In terms of artifacts, ice is going to be the Granorum, strategist, and transformation card, which is your standard setup for precision, which actually comes in handy because normally you just be using the Grim for the passive damage from the damage pet. But as ice, you actually get the Frostbite and PI setup, which is nice because then you don't have to worry about setting up with your abilities. And in terms of augments, it's going to be either whatever, if it's going to be whatever current tier of augment it's going to be for adaptive. And your bottom origins are going to be whatever the highest rank or whatever ranking that you have. And then in your generator mods, which you can't see here, as at my base, obviously you're going to have precision in your reds. And then you can easily have just health in your blues. Okay, let's get into the actual loadout. So with respect to loadout for melee based, we're going to have Bitter Winds, Clip with Ice Bash, Clip with Reflection. Bitter Winds is a mobile PI, so it's unlike where's Tempest here? Wintry Tempest, where it's going to be placed on the ground. Bitter Winds will be able to follow you around. And Frost Slam, Robot Psychic, and Neo Venom Boost. And like I said before, that's going to be focusing on Haymaker. So it's basically the triple clip, Haymaker, Clip of Frost Slam, Haymaker, Clip of Frost Slam, Haymaker, Clip with the triple clip, and so on. You'll see that in the rotation. Now, why I'm not running Snow Devil? You can technically put Snow Devil here and have a similar rotation. It's going to do similar damage, but the issue is that in the game now, where Bitter Winds go? So in the game now, you have buff trolls are much more prevalent. Anytime you use like a trinket or a Neovenom boost or supply drop, all that is not going to impact Snow Devil. Snow Devil doesn't get buffed in terms of the damage, it's only CR based. So if you're running content, you're going to have much more opportunity to have Bitter Winds increase in damage from the dot, along with Frost Time, but you're going to have much more opportunities to have increased damage from Bitter Winds than you would Snow Devil. Like you have the double Snow Devils out for a little bit, but I mean at the same time, like I said before, nothing buffs Snow Devil. So if you're running with a bunch of Might DPS with a buff troll giving you an extra like 10,000, 12,000 Might, I mean that does nothing for Snow Devil, but Bitter Winds it does. So that's why I choose to run Bitter Winds. You can get similar parses with Snow Devil, but in actual content you're going to have more damage running Bitter Winds. So we can actually show that and get into the rotation here. And you get the gist there. I mean, I had a little hiccup in one of the parses there, but I mean, at 42k prec, considering that I don't have the OP head on because if I did Brawling, it would go flying, so that's another 500 prec missing. I don't have the OP legs, so that's probably another 300 or 400 prec missing. I have to use Brawling base from the Bot Metropolis weapons, so that's why it's 265 and everything else is 277, so that's another 300 prec I'm missing there just because I can't, I don't have the Splinter Coin and the Aether to get that, so I should be sitting at around 43 probably K prec, roughly. I'm not sure what, I'm not a prec DPS on live server, so I'm not sure what general prec is, but I mean, at the same time, 41k prec, 85, 90, 81, 89, 88, that's still going to be very well. And then with the proper stats, it should be easily over 1 million for the parse, which is going to be on par for what prec should be. And like I said before, you can technically do Snow Devil's the exact same rotation if you just prefer Snow Devil. So, I mean, it's the same thing. You just have Snow Devil out and then do the rotation. But, I mean, at the same time, like I said before, Bitter Winds is a quite powerful dot, and you're going to miss all that buff damage when you're not running Bitter Winds. So let me go back to it here. So like I said before in the loadout, if you have like a buff troll or you're taking a trinket, you're taking a supply drop, you're taking a Neovenom boost, you're popping a trinket that has might buff on it, I mean, you're missing this whole dot and all the strategist card takes from that. So that's the other thing as well. If you're running the strategist card, obviously the strategist card is not going to proc on Stone Devil or it can proc on Bitter Wind. So even though the strategist card procs will be lower because you're might based compared to prec, I mean, it's still free damage. So that's the rotation there. Let's get into the next rotation. Okay, for the ice single target, yes, you see Snow Devil. No, I'm not being hypocritical based on what I mentioned for melee and ranged. It's just that in this situation, in single target, ice doesn't really have any alternatives to use to clip with. It's just not worth it. You're much better off using Snow Devil. You'll get 2 Snow Devils out with reflection. You can use the phase dodge clip and then use the second clip with reflection. That's completely up to you. If you're not super speed, don't worry about it. You don't have to. Just clip with reflection and have another filler power in. That's completely your prerogative, like a double supercharge or something like that, or another shield. In terms of the single target, we are using dual wield. So this means we have to spec the dual wield tree. So dual, we're taking everything, flurry shot and explosive shot, just in case there's some ads with the single target fight. And which means we have to spec bow down as well. So the only like if you want to go full super speed, I mean technically you use tornado pull there. And then if there's like a buff troll or something like that, you get a little bit increased damage, but there's just not as many viable opportunities that we would have with ranged and melee to substitute Snow Devil for. And there you have the single target rotation. I mean, single target with flurry shots being flurry shots. Really nothing really changes there. Getting going, once you have the double snow devils out, you get a little bit more damage in terms of like 42, 44, 48 in terms of the hits, or 57, 60 versus 65. But, I mean, single target is single target with flurry shot. That's been the same for pretty much better part of stat revamp. It's always been do a flurry shot. I mean, slightly changed with how they do the 4-tick, but I mean, still the same principle. Okay, so for ice ranged, once again, we're falling into Brawling. I mean, you could do a similar loadout with dual explosive shot. I'm just using Brawling because you have Brawling from melee base, but at the same time, I don't want you to have to spec 3 weapons. So I use one-handed flurry in a lot of my videos. I use Brawling Haymaker in a lot of my videos, and then obviously you need dual flurry shot for single target. So if you did that, you'd have to buy 3 different weapons. You have to buy Brawling one-handed and dual wield, all like 95 marks, and all the ether if you want the elite weapons. So that's expensive. So I'm trying to save you on weapon costs. So you're obviously going to need dual wield, and if you use Brawling, you can cover melee and ranged at the same time. So that's why I focus on Brawling. And with Brawling, we're going to be using Storm Mastery. So you need to make sure you spec martial arts, which you should anyway in the general spec. Just spend, I mean, it's what, an extra 3, 6, 9 skill points, 10 skill points if you spec the weapon innate. So in terms of this loadout, we're relying a little bit on the strategist card here. So Resonating Gale is going to be clipped with Ice Bash and Reflection. Now Resonating Gale sets up a dot and inflicts Frostbite, which doesn't really matter because we have the Grim running. But Resonating Gale is going to set up a dot, and then we have Ice Boulder Strike as our main damage dealer, which is basically because of Brawling, Shuriken Storm, and how it lines up, you're going to be hitting one of these off cooldown each time, which is why you need 2 powers with at least 3-second cooldown. And the Robot Psychic and the Venom Boost to level it out. So once again, this rotation is going to be much more beneficial if you have a buff troll in the group, or once again a Spy Drop Trinket, stuff like that, because Resonating Gale, the dots can hit harder. Ice Boulder Strike already is one of the hardest hitting powers, has really good crit magnitude and critical chance. I mean, Reflection is just a clip. And once again, I would prefer to run Supercharge Neo Venom Boost, just so you can earn that more quickly. But, I mean, the same thing, you can run Critical Ice Bash if you wanted to. But you have Transformation cards, so pushing the criticals will help a little bit, but it's going to be marginal compared to what it will be earning more Supercharge consistently. So, let's show you what I mean in the rotation. Okay, so you get just the rotation there. Now, with it being not reliant on the strategist card, but with it having so many close ties with the strategist card in terms of procs, and where did I start? There. So 93, 96, 1.1, 1.5, just under a mil. And you can dip down to the 80s depending. You can see the hits. 326 hits compared to 262, 333 compared to 261. That means I was missing a whole bunch of strategic card procs. Which is going to happen. It's a 10-second parse, obviously over 30 seconds that would even out. Same thing, 84 over a mil, 86, that's going to level out to mid-90s. Obviously 93, 96, 1.1 is going to level out to, like 96, 97. So, still viable with Brawling range. Once again, with the buff troll, Ice Boulder Strike, Bracing and Gale, dots go through the roof. Same thing with Neo Venom Boost. So you got the potential for a lot extra damage, especially with a Trinket as well. Okay, so with ice tanking, we'll get into the spec first here, and then we'll talk about a couple loadout variations. So personally for me, ice is always going to be hybrid. You're not using your yes, you're constantly using your superpowers, but you've got plenty of opportunities to use weapon attacks as ice because you're going to be between shields, and it's just too much to give up the 5% dominance and restoration towards your shield strength. So ice for me is always going to be hybrid. The critical healing chance and magnitudes don't affect anything else. Ice doesn't have any self-heal moves, so all this is going to do is affect your soda, so it's not worth it. Just take 10 and 10. Now, this is where it kind of differs a little bit. Dominance is always going to be 275, or whatever the max dominance is, that's what you take as a primary stat. After that, it's going to be kind of dependent on what your skill points are. Restoration is going to be the next focus stat. So what you want to do is kind of get in increments of 60. So if you don't have many skill points, at least put 60 in resto, and then 40 in health. Say if you only have 100 left to spare. Or ideally you want to get to at least 100 resto, and then you get that 10%. But once... I know it's not realistic that all you guys are going to be endgame skill points with 565 and plenty to spare. But the rationale behind my thinking is that if I put 50 skill points into health, it gives me about 2200 health or so. If I put 50 skill points in restoration, it gives me 400 resto. When you're in FGE or even regular, if everything's hitting you for 20, 30k ticks, or Zeus is hitting you for 80k, 100k hits, 2100 health is not going to save you. I mean, it's not gonna make or break your tanking having an extra 2200 health, but to have an extra 408 or 410 rest or whatever it was, to have that constantly impacting your shield formula, that's going to have a much greater impact. especially as ice. Because as like I said, pretty much all of your powers as ice, except maybe like 2, are going to be shields. So you have much more overall effectiveness running restoration than you do health, but you still need your base health just to have it. So ideally for me, I only put 100 skill points in health to get the 10% and everything else in resto. But you do, if you have lower skill points after your dominance, you want to make sure you put your resto stat first. So once your resto stat's at 100, put like 50 or 60 into health to get your health up a bit, and then continue on with resto. So in terms of gear, weapons going to be absorption adapter always. Head mod, this is a DPS head mod for me right now, but really there's no head mods for tanking unless you're running the Gemini, and then you run that dash attack or whatever supercharge you're running, perfect poise. Neck mod's always going to be fortified assault. Back mod's always going to be accelerated winter ward. Chest mod's always going to be hardy. Leg mod, nothing scales, so don't worry about it. In your trinket, your loadout slots can vary. I prefer always for AoE or for an ad loadout, always have chronomatic emitters for your AoE. You don't necessarily need it because you've got Resonating Gale, which is the best CC move for a tank in the game. So you don't require it, but it's always handy. I always prefer the breakout trinket, no matter what I'm always running that. Doesn't matter. All the breakout trinkets are the same. You can get it wherever. Doesn't matter. But I mean, I always prefer to run a breakout trinket regardless of the fact. Tank trinket. This is once again just for a little health boost, but once again it's not required. You can run like a supply, and then obviously the orbital strike. And head mod, max damage. Foot mod, tumbling master. You could have explosive block as well. Now, in terms of the artifacts, this is basically where there's going to be differing opinions. For me personally, at least on an AoE loadout for ads, for hallway ads, stuff like that, like a non-boss loadout, I don't run a supercharge. This is just me personally. But I understand that the meta is that you have to provide supercharge for your group for Gemini spam. So if you have a Gemini at 200, then yes, you'd wear that just to help the group out. So in that case, you drop Everyman, put Gemini on, then you'd run like dash attack and like Pheromone Bloom, and that's what your load would be. So you'd be spamming dash attack and Pheromone Bloom off cooldown no matter what, just to provide supercharge to the group so they could regen. So that's scenario number 1. That's not how I like to ice tank, but I understand that that's how the meta is right now. Everyone, if you're a tank or healer, your main job is to spam supercharge because, I mean, no one cares about you. The DPS care about themselves and how much damage they're doing. So your job as a support role is to give them supercharge or don't be bothering being in the group. That's the unfortunate meta we are in right now. But personally for me, that's not how I like to spec it. I much prefer not running a supercharge as ice, only if I have to, in the boss loadout, which I'll get to. So what was it before? I had Shatter in here, and I had Heartlight Shield. So like I said, that's rendition 1. If you have supercharge spam or in a league run or something like that, then go for it. But if maintain your survivability first and foremost, and before spamming for the group. But don't be surprised if they ask you, hey, do you have Gemini? But yeah, other than that, Manacles of Force, 100% required is ice. That's the only artifact for tanking artifact that's only worth it to 200. The other artifacts, you could get away with it like 160, that'd be fine. Mystic Symbol of Summons, handy for ice, especially for AoE, because you get a little bit of healing component, some extra defense. And other than that, just a Refractor is okay, but I mean, that's more for bosses. Nothing else really applies. Like I said before, Gemini, so basically you're just subbing Gemini or Everyman prototype. There is the Lasso artifact that came out with Wonderverse. I personally don't run that as a tank. I feel like it's more disruptive. But I mean, if that's your playstyle, then go for it. You can also use that. But that's not my preference, and that's not an artifact that I would use. So going into the loadout. So for an AoE loadout for the non-Gemini spam, I have Inescapable Storm, Resonating Gale, Reflection, Winter Ward, Shatter Restraints, and Heartlight Shield. More of a typical standard loadout you see for that. Pull the ads in, group them up the Resonating Gale, and then you're basically just cycling shields. So we can kind of see briefly how this will work. Let's see if I can get to the point where Shadow Golem will spawn his ads. I'm not sure if that's a damage check related. We'll drop an orbital just in case. So if I can get him to spawn his ads. Then I can show you at least what that'll look like. If not, at least you'll see the rotation. But I mean, ice is really standard of rotation. It's really simple to pick up ice and play for it. It's mainly you just understanding what's going to hurt you the most and when you need to pop your shields. Because obviously Shatter Restraints is going to be your weakest, followed by Reflect, followed by Winter Ward, and then followed by Hard Light Shield, which I've had many videos on the topic covering shield strength. I'm not sure if he's going to spawn his ads. Pretty sure it's damage based. Pretty sure they're damage based. I mean, either way, we can jump to like a set of ads just to show you the effective Resonant Gale and why it's so useful. Let me find a group of ads. This would be some birds or something down here. Not enough. Yeah, it's close enough. And we'll grab these guys too. So the nice thing about Resonant Gale, these are kind of grouped up, is that it's a range CC move. So you can hit it, it's a knockdown, gonna gather everyone up, same thing. You can just kind of keep them just juggled from range. You don't have to worry about being close enough. You can close enough use emitters if you want, but I mean, if you're just running to the next set of ads, knock them down, they're grouped up for the DPS, and you kind of just go from there. So that's why Gale is going to be 100% required on every single AoE loadout when you're going to have ads in question, because it's just the perfect CC move, being able to group up everything so tightly and to be knocked down. And it's 3-second cooldown, so you can just keep spamming it. They're going to stand back up, and then basically you just hit it again. So that's going to be the AoE loadout in practice. Okay, so for more of a boss loadout, not too much changes. We have Lasso. You can technically use Frost Snipe as well. I use Lasso just in case you need to pull, but that's going to be your hard taunt from Iconics. Resonant Gale, just in case. There's a lot of boss fights that have add components to them, so Resonant Gale, you want that for that CC. So say like Phoenix Cannon, DME, even like this new DLC on Grail, even on Zeus, you still have those adds. So it's nice to have something to crowd control. You can use Frost Slam as well, like Resonant Gale, just because you can gather them. Reflection, Winter Ward, Hard Light Shield, and the main change is going to be Dash Attack, which means you're changing your artifact to either Gemini. Because boss fights, you're going to need a Supercharge just in case you need those moments to recover your shield. Essentially, what I use a Supercharge for is to recover my cooldowns. So if I'm at a moment where like Reflection, Winter Ward, Hard Light Shield's all on cooldown, I can use Dash Attack to kind of either get out of the way, or Perfect Poise is actually prefer, just because Dash Attack you have to be in movement mode. But essentially, it gives me the opportunity to have seconds tick off on these shields that can help reset them. So then once I have all the shields back, then I can kind of go into my regular shield rotation. If you don't have any add component, I would use like Shatter Restraints. I put another shield on there. Shatter Restraints is weak, but some some boss components are going to have a group breakout to them. But just depends if there's adds. So we can kind of go into a little example here in the rotation. And the spec is the same way. Let me just pop forward. So the spec is still the same. You put majority into restoration, 150. You put 100 in health just to get the 10%, and then obviously the majority in dominance. So the reason why I like ice tanking specifically is that it gives you the greatest opportunity to go for counters, where tanks like say like Atomic, you don't really have that ability to go for counters because you're constantly in your combos. Rage, you have to worry about rage canceling, so you're prioritizing that over counters. Earth you can go for counters as well because you can brick tank, and then fire as well. So that's my preference here. As ice, I'm always going to have a shield active so that I can go for counters. The other thing as well, you have a choice. You don't technically have to use Mystic Symbol of 7. It's not the best for boss fights. It'll give you a little bit of defense and some healing back, but not as much if there's no ads. But the main thing I do is that Distor Refractor is also good with ice, but since that was the first ice artifact, you really there's a good chance you don't have that anymore as an artifact. And as you saw, the text from Everyman Prototype doesn't work the best with ice in terms of converting health into defense, whereas ice, your health as ice is going to be the lowest out of the tanks. Maybe atomic. It'd probably be about tied with atomic. Like Earth, you're going to have pretty much high health because you don't need restoration. Rage and fire, obviously their mechanics are based on that, so you're going to have high health from that. So that's why Everyman is not the best with ice. You can still get away with it, but there it is. But essentially, if there was ads, or I'm not going to do enough damage to push the metahuman to his next phase. So that's why Risen and Gale's not going to work. And same thing, if I had like everything on cooldown, okay, I'm stuck, I'm still taking damage, I can go into dash attack. I also get the 5% increase in damage, or sorry, not increase in damage, but 5% increase in stats on Dominance and Resto from either Gemini, which feeds into my other shields, resetting. So that's essentially it there, and you kind of just cycle through. I mean, ice is a very straightforward tank in terms of how to learn it, and then after that, you're just getting used to, you're learning what abilities and what combos hurt the most so that you know properly when to hit your shield. So you can't just hit reflect when you know you're going to get to like a 5-tack combo or something like that. It's not going to be viable. You're going to have to use Winter Ward or Hard Light Shield for that, because it's not practical to use anything else. But that's it. That's going to be the boss one.